Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well. Thank you all for joining today for today's cataloging interest group. I actually forgot to put this in here, but my name is Britta Dorsey. I am the Development Support Administrator for Evergreen, Indiana for you all. And today's agenda for the interest group, we are going, of course, I'm going to go over some of the resources available to you as catalogers in Evergreen. And the main thing today, we are going to talk about fixed fields in the fixed fields that we deal with as we catalog. And then I'll also go over some upcoming events that may be of interest to you or another colleague of yours that might be of interest. Useful resources, as always, I want to point out that scholarships are available to Cat 1 holders to take courses by MCLS. Please contact Ruth with the course information and its link. You can also contact me, but I'll end up forwarding it to Ruth because I don't have authorization to actually purchase the courses for you, but it will get to her either way. If you're interested in learning more about what we will cover today, as well as other fixed fields, you can visit the OCLC Bib Formats and Standards website. And I hope you all have that in bookmark form one way or another anyway, because it's a great resource for us. And also the Library of Congress Mark 21 format for Bib data. All of the information I have for you today is from both of these websites. So they are great resources for you, even if not just fixed fields, but everything MARC related. Useful websites for catalogers, and these are all useful websites for catalogers, just a list of links that I've put together that might be of interest to you, whether it's for learning more about MARC, information about RDA, headings and authorities, as well as other information that we might put into our records, like reading programs and Lexile information. Another great resource that I have found over the years when cataloging, especially audiovisual, is the Online Audiovisual Catalogers website, or OLOC. They have great resources for cataloging video games and DVD, Blu-ray. And they also have their own OLOC video game genre vocab. So that's a great tool to use so we can add some genre headings to those records. And all of the links, the useful resources, those are all links that you can access directly through the slideshow. So we are going to talk about the fixed fields in specific categories. Of course, we're going to talk about language material, continuing resources or serials, projected mediums like visual materials, and non-musical and musical sound recordings, or sound recordings or audiobooks. We'll also talk about the one field that I found that's specific to computer files, which is what we use for software and video games. The fixed field grid itself sends information to not only the 008 field, but also the 006 and the leader. Many of the fields duplicate the information to one or more of these control fields, but in different locations. And as we talk about them, I'll include where you can find the information in the leader, the 006 and the 008 control fields. And this is how I'm going to format the slides. The leader is known as a fixed field that is 24 characters long. The 006 is 18 characters, and the 008 is 40 characters long. Basically, each of these define the record, whether it's how the record is processed or read, or specific information about the actual item. But before we completely go into it, I just wanted to let you know you don't really have to remember any of this. A cool feature at Evergreen that we have are like submenus or subtext menus. When you right click on one of the control or on one of the fixed fields, let me bring that up real quick. We'll just go here. On most of these, when you right click on the field, you get a submenu for the available codes for that specific field. So that is super helpful. So don't feel like you have to memorize anything today. When you see a pound sign or hashtag, it means that you will leave the space blank. And then I'm not going to cover all of the fields or all of the codes for each field. Like, for example, I won't go over all of the codes for the GPub or the government publication field, because generally speaking, you won't be handling those types of materials. If so, I do apologize. And also, each field should be linked to its respective page on OCLC's bib formats and standards for more information and for quick access. We're going to talk about general fixed fields first. If a field can be found in 2 or more record types, we're going to discuss it here. So first, we're going to go over the type and bib level. The type and bib level fields, they work together to determine what kind of item is being cataloged. For type, we use an A for language material, books, graphic novels. We use G for videos, I for audiobooks, and J for CD music. Kits are usually mixed materials, so you'll use a P for kits in Evergreen. And then for the bib level, you'll likely only ever see an M and an S. And up here, like I mentioned, you can see, so for example, here for the type field, when you enter the type code, it goes into the leader in the character 6, and then in the 006 in the 00 field. The descriptive cataloging form tells us whether the record is an AACR2 record or an RDA record. This is usually the first thing you'll see when you load mark edit that tells us it's an RDA record. When we bring in an on-order record, we'll usually see a 5 in the encoding level, and that should be updated once the item is in hand. An 8 means that the data in the record was retrieved from a source like the CIP or publisher prior to the item being published. And in many, you'll see I do not have listed a K or I, which is what we used to use. Those have been made obsolete. So if you are editing a record that has a K or an I, you can update it to the corresponding number. So for a K, you'll use a 7, and I believe I's are blank. If you ever enter anything in the form fixed field, it will likely be for microfilm, large print, or direct electronic material like read-along books. The form is it's the form of the material being described. And then the target audience is the intellectual level of the audience, of the intended audience. It usually matches the 521 field if it's present in the record. The audience field is required for Evergreen, Indiana, and you'll usually find YA material with the letter D. When handling video discs and video games that are rated R or M rated or rated explicit like music CDs, you will use an E. All other ratings, like for TV shows and movies, will use a G. And also books that are for language material that was specifically made for, or not, but generally made for like an adult audience, then you would also use an E. Okay, type of control. This is more for archival control status, and for us, it'll most likely remain blank. The modified record, or the MREC, will also likely remain blank. It's whether the bib information was modified for entry into machine readable form. We usually leave it blank if we are transcribing Library of Congress or National Library of Medicine cataloging. If we are transcribing it directly as is found on those printed copies. And it will likely be faster for the language code. It's 3 characters. It will likely be faster to search for a language code from the list or from this code list instead of looking for it in the submenu. I've linked to the list here, so you can do like a Control F to search for a specific language, and then you'll have the code here on the left. Country of publication is of course, the state or country that the item was published, produced, or executed in. Similar to the languages, I recommend it might be faster to look up the country in the code list. Some of them are only 2 letters, but you could have up to 3. like for example, states in America are the first two letters are for the state itself, and then the U at the end usually just stands for United States. And for example, Belize is BH, and then that third character would be left blank. And you'll likely see these codes in the DTST or the type of date publication status field. C is used for serials that are currently being published. P is used when a work with identical content but in a different medium has a later release date than the original work. For example, we used for example in motion picture that was released in 1965, the video recording was released in 1978. So that's how we would use the P code. Single dates is when the copyright and publication date are the same. You only need one. T is used when the publication year is different than the copyright year. And when it comes to large print material, I have seen both R and T used in OCLC records, and code R is used for the reprint or original date. It's used for re-releases of motion pictures and video recordings in the same medium, reissues of sound recordings in the same medium or even a different medium, off prints or previously published resources. But again, I've seen both T and R being used in OCLC records. And if you have any questions, well, first, do any of you have any questions? And if so, please feel free to go ahead and put them in the chat and I will get to them and we'll make sure we answer those to the best of my ability. The dates is pretty self-explanatory. We have two fields for the dates. We have date 1 and date 2. This will cover both if you have a publication date that is different from like the copyright date. The publication date would normally go in date 1 and the copyright date would go in date 2. However, if you are using the code S for single date, you would just use the date 1. You always want to go left to right. So the date 1 will always need to have something in it, whereas the date 2 does not. The government publication or GPub, this just indicates whether the resource is published, produced by, for a type of government agency or subdivision. You'll likely not, depending on, well, it depends on what you're cataloging, but for the most part in public libraries, you might not be dealing with government publications, so you would leave that field blank. All right, now let's talk about language materials or monographs. This is a sample of what the fields you will see in monographs. I just took this from our MARC templates, so it's not filled in completely, but this is what you usually see in the MARC-Edit enhanced MARC editor for the fixed field grid for books. Illustrations, you can use up to 4 codes in alphabetical order in the fixed field. It's usually matches what you find in the physical description recorded in the 300 field. There are more codes available, but these are the most common ones that we use in the catalog in our MARC records. And then I had to practice this, the Festschrift field, it's basically whether you're telling the record whether or not it is that type of item. And what that is it's defined as a complementary or memorial publication, usually in the form of a collections of essays, addresses, or biographical, bibliographic, or scientific, or other contributions for people, like for academic scholars, their writings published in honor of an academic scholar or a respected person. And again, depending on your collection, you may never catalog one of these and can therefore just use a 0 in that field. We want to include something in the content field, fixed field, if a significant part of the material has one of these types. There are more to choose from, but these are likely the ones regular catalogers will see. 6, you'll not only comics and graphic novels, you'll also use that for manga. For the biography fixed field, this is whether or not the item contains, not necessarily is, a biography and the type therein. We have, of course, A for autobiography, B for individual biography, C for collective biography. So if it's a biography of more than one person, or D for contains biographical information. For literary form, we generally use the 0 and 1 to denote whether the item is nonfiction or fiction, but the other codes can be used to specify forms. So we have, of course, we have P for poetry, J for short stories, H for humor, satire, D for dramas, E for essays, and I believe there are a couple more in that list. If your item has an index, you'll enter a 1 in the index field. That's basically all it's for. It's to say whether the work has an index. 0 is no index. 1 means the index is present. And similar to other fields, unless you're cataloging specific material regarding a conference, you'll likely only ever put a 0 in the conference publication field. 1 means that it is a conference publication. It's whether the item consists of the proceedings, reports, or summaries of a conference. Next, we're going to go over some fixed fields that are found in continuing resources like magazines, newspapers, or anything that is cataloged as a serial. And like the monographs, this is the fixed field grid that you will normally see for serials. We have a type for A. The bib level is S for serial. We have a description I because it will likely be an art, will create the record as an art using RDA. Of course, country, language, and then we'll go over some of the special fields for that. Seeing records with the code for periodical. P encompasses a broader range of resources that publish more than just annually. If possible, the preference is to use the code for a specific type, like G for magazine or N for newspaper. And I should have said, this is for the type of continuing resource, the SRTP. So for example, in the SRTP, we have P for periodical. So that will cover a broader range of the resources. But again, we have the G for magazine, N for newspaper, and a T for directory, etc. For regularity, normalized irregular is for those publications that are regular with a known exception, kind of like when we have magazines that are published monthly except for September. If your resource is only published a certain number of times a year without any rhyme or reason, you will use the X to stand for completely irregular. And of course, R is regular for, we know it's going to come out weekly. People Magazine is going to release their weekly magazine every week, so they would get an R. And U is for unknown. The frequency, this is just the frequency of a resource. This should match what is entered into the regularity field. So whether it's annual, bi-monthly, daily, monthly, quarterly, or weekly, you'll want to make sure that what you choose in there matches what is in the regularity field. And then the nature of the entire work is coded by what the item is as opposed to what it contains. But remember, this is for continuing resources, not items cataloged as monographs. I would say the comparable field to this one for monographs is the content field. So we have B for bibliographies, E for encyclopedias, F for handbooks. We have codes for biography, indexes, directories, and yearbooks. There are a lot of manga, graphic novels, and other stories that start out as web series. And if that series is recreated in a physical format and cataloged as a continuing resource or serial, you would select a code for this field, the form of original item. And you would likely select an O or an S if you want to just go the generic electronic resource route. So it would likely online because, web series are usually online. And then A for microfilm, D large print. And then we have codes for newspaper format, Braille, direct electronic, and electronic. Okay, projected mediums. This is audiovisual, or not audiovisual, but visual materials. As usual, I have an image of the fixed field grid for what we'll use for movies and televisions. So you can see for the type, we use the G, description I, language, country, and then of course the special fields for projected mediums. TMAT, or the type of visual material. This is the type of visual material being described. This can be used for projected mediums, 2D non-projected mediums, 3D artifacts, or naturally occurring objects and kits. Realia will be used for anything that doesn't fit into any of the other categories listed on the description page. So of course we have motion picture, video recording, art, original, game, and then realia and kit. Time for recordings is coded in minutes. For anything above 999 minutes, you'll use 000. I think that usually occurs only with like David Attenborough documentaries and such. But for the most part, you will enter 3 characters. The NNN means that it is not applicable. And then you would enter 3 hyphens if the length is unknown. Technique, this is what the technique used to create the motion for motion pictures and video recordings. We have animation and live action, and then we also have codes, whether it is not applicable, whether if the technique is unknown, or if there is another technique other than what is listed. And I tried to think and look for information because we have animation, but it didn't really cover on how like CGI movies are managed. I believe, let's take a look real quick. Why not? Let's do it. Oh, goodness. What's a recent? I used to be so into movies and now I barely watch them. Let's try Shrek Forever After, because that is the first thing that came to mind. Let's see. Let's try this record. Okay, so technique. This came in. I was reminded of this problem. Sometimes if you, when you're working on a certain form of a record, and then when you go to catalog another form, the fixed fields kind of stick to the previous form. So if you just refresh the page, they should match the actual record you're viewing. So, okay, so for here we're using A for animation, and it is a form of animation, so that totally makes sense. Next, we are going to cover the musical and non-musical sound recordings. We can see, as usual, a lot of them have similar fields available as other types of items, but then we have a couple other fields specific for like audiobooks and music CDs. So for music parts, this is indicating whether the item is being cataloged, whether the item being cataloged is or contains parts. If you're cataloging an audiobook, you will use N for not applicable. But if you are a music CD, say for an orchestra, you would likely use E for instrumental parts. And literary text for sound recordings, or the L text field. There are a few other codes than this for this field. And if your item doesn't fall into any of those, you can select Z for other. There is a Z for other. But if you are cataloging audiobooks, audiobooks would have a code. If you're cataloging a music CD, for example, you would just leave it blank. This is the type of literary text on spoken word sound recordings. Accompanying material, this is the contents of program notes and other accompanying material. Monica asks, is part only to be used on sheet music, not music CDs? Let's take a look. Please erase what I may have just said about parts. Thank you, Monica. Parts is likely used just for sheet music, as seen here on the parts, music parts OCLC page. So we would have for sheet music, so whether it's just like piano music with no words for like vocal parts, you would just do instrumental parts, and instrumental and vocal would be both instrumental and vocal parts. Thank you very much, Monica. Let's see. Yeah, N is not applicable. It is not notated music. And the default is N for not applicable. Thank you very much, Monica. I appreciate it. Okay, so if the item is a music sound recording, for the literary text for sound recordings field, you will just leave it blank, as it is considered a music sound recording. Company material, the contents, this is for contents of program notes and other company material for sound recordings. Generally, a specific code is used only if a significant part of the accompanying material is the type represented by the code. So we have a blank for if there's no accompanying material, B for bibliography, D for libretto or text. And let me bring this up. And this is if the accompanying matter is substantial, or this is kind of small probably, substantial or unique. So we have a code for discography, and the default is there is no accompanying matter. Of course, libretto or text. Yeah, and a reminder, there are codes more than what I have on these slides. I tried to select the ones that we will most likely see in our records. Next, we have the form of composition, or comp. This identifies the form of the musical composition. We have, of course, there's one where there's no information supplied. If they are anthems, we can enter an AN. With one for ballads, bluegrass, blues, carols, country music. If you have a motion picture music for like an original soundtrack, and then an N for not applicable, and that's used for when it's not a musical sound recording. So when you are actually cataloging an audiobook, you would use NN in the comp field for not applicable. And then, of course, there are other codes available. Transposition and arrangement. This is for indicating whether or all parts of the item is a transposition and or arrangement of another work. Blank means that it is not an arrangement or transposition, or it hasn't been specified. A is for it is transposed. B is that it is an arrangement. C is that it is both transposed and arranged, and N is not applicable in that it is not notated music. And let's take a look at this one real quick. Default code is N for not applicable, that it is not notated music. Okay, I did add computer files since we catalog video games and software. However, there's only really one field that I found that is specific to this type, which is the type of computer file or file. I think for the most part, we will use B for computer program, or G for game. I looked at our templates. It looks like we use B for the software templates and G for the video game templates. And G on OCLC says it's for recreational or educational use, whether it's software or video games. Does anyone have any questions? Again, I took all of this information from the OCLC website. To me, it was a little easier to take in what the code was for, as opposed to the Mark 21 bib formats page. Okay, well, announcements, please use the attendance check-in form, put that in the chat. So please fill that out. Please use the future topics. That's how I got this topic. Someone requested fixed fields to go over. This is what I will use to choose our next interest group. I also, if any of you ever want to talk about something that you are knowledgeable about or passionate about, please reach out. I would be happy to kind of, if you wanted to present something that day, I think that would be a wonderful thing to do. The Evergreen Community Cataloging Interest Group, the next one is coming up on February 14th. I have a webinar coming up on searching the catalog. Basically, I want to just do a deep dive on the features of the catalog and different ways we can use it to search for what we need or for what a patron needs. That is on February 23rd. Since I do not have the asynchronous advanced cataloging course finished yet, I am going to host another set of advanced cataloging training at the end of February on the 28th and March 1st. I think I've set it down, instead of 6 hours, it's going to be about 4 hours. I'll do 2 hours each day. So I will have that up on the calendar soon, so people can register for that, and I'll send out an email on the Evergreen Updates listserv, so people can register that way as well. The next Evergreen Cataloging Committee meeting is March 6th, so we will not meet again. The Cataloging Interest Group will not meet until April. And then also, I am also doing a webinar on the OPAC on March 21st. I don't ever recall really taking an actual class on how to use the OPAC when I was at my old library. So I kind of wanted to do that for us and kind of just go over everything that the patron sees on their end. And if I could find a way to stream, like how to use the app, and I would do that too. But for this webinar, we'll focus on the actual website itself. Karen, I never received my LU from last month. Have they been sent out? No, they have not. I have created them. I've wanted to send out a link to the edited video yet, or with it, but I haven't had time to edit the video yet. So I will just send out the LEs, but they are ready to go. So I'm going to be sending out a large amount of LU certificates over the next week or so, trying to get caught up on any remaining certificates from 2022 and then what we have already covered so far in 2023. I'm actually looking forward to them too, Anita. I think they'll be kind of fun. So thank you all for joining today. Contact information is right here at the end. Of course, you have mine and Ruth's emails and phone numbers. Please don't hesitate to reach out, and we will return your call and or email as soon as we are able. So I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.